After several days of back-to-back meetings and sessions at the World Economic Forum, the South African delegation was ready with the feedback. They say investors had questions about developments back home, these centered around Eskom and fiscal sustainability.
We want the problems at Eskom to be resolved, but we also indicated that we have developed a multi-pronged energy strategy now in South Africa that involves Eskom, but also renewables and other participants in the generation of electricity in the country, that we should achieve a state of power certainty in the medium to long term. So that was one issue, Eskom. The second one, in my case, was about the fiscal sustainability of the South African budget, and I indicated the steps that we are taking to ensure that we manage the debt, we have responsible spending and investment in infrastructure and so on, the detail of which will be elaborated on the 26th of February.
Had a number of meetings with people really interested in the whole field of renewable energy. Clearly, that is seen as a massive opportunity going forward for any multinational in that field. On
the slow pace of implementing structural reforms, Mboweni says there's a need for long conversations with unions to be had.
There are some areas where they do not agree, and therefore conversations have to be had with the trades union movement to debate and discuss some of the structural issues, whether they are around collective bargaining matters and so on. These are critical structural issues that we have to discuss. Let me give an example of a delay. Government has long decided, for example, on the release of the spectrum, something that should have been done a year or two ago. Now it has been caught up in legal and procedural issues. Meanwhile, we're losing time in terms of migrating to 5G, whatever it is. And others are already talking about China going to 6G. So we have to move. It's a key structural issue for #data must fall, for example. Key for move of information, of communication. Business and economics thrive through communication. So that's key. So that's one of the issues of Asia, for example, I could talk about. The issue of fixing the harbors and ports. We can't talk forever about fixing whether it's Richards Bay or Durban or Port Elizabeth. We need to move to unlock the movement of goods and so on. Those are some of the structural issues. You have to sort out, for example, the relationship between Transnet and PRASA. One entity owns the rail, the other has the stock. I mean, you have to rationalize everything and have a single railways policy and so on. So we're moving on those issues. Structural reforms don't take place in 1 month or in 2 months. They're a process.
Nedbank CEO Mike Brown says although there are tough challenges back home, a story can still be told about how change is beginning to unfold.
We can tell a story about how we're starting to deliver on changing the South African outlook and narrative, the acceleration of structural reforms that we've heard government talk about. So those are the three key things that I try and achieve at Davos for Nedbank.
One of the main aims of the World Economic Forum is to effect change in the world, and a new report was launched titled Embracing Complexity Towards a Shared Understanding of Systems Change.
It really requires systems change to effect a real change that we're trying to effect to meet those SDGs, whether it's in climate change, whether it's in issues of inequality, whether it's in issues of gender. We need all the players on board.
After yet another busy and cold January week in Davos, delegates and participants head back home. After 50 years of the existence of the World Economic Forum this year, it remains to be seen how discussions will affect global change. Diaboseto, SABC News, Davos, Switzerland.